it's a story I've been wanting to do for a while. I see Iowans come up to you at events and they know about your personal losses in your life, and they share those stories of their own losses with you. And I guess the first question is just sort of, what is it like to have so many strangers coming up and sharing those deeply personal things with you?
Well, to be honest with you, sometimes it's difficult because when those things happen, it brings back everything in your own life, as if it sort of happened yesterday. But the reason I do it, and my son Hunter and my daughter and my wife, they all wonder how I can do it. And because people will call and say, will you call my friend who just lost a son or a daughter, or will you do a eulogy for, etc. But being the recipient of so much empathy and understanding from other people, you realize that the only people who can really, it's not about me, it's general, the only people who can really allay people's concerns are somebody who's really been through it. You know, people would come up after my losses and say, I understand. And they meant well. You knew they had no idea. How could they? They couldn't have any idea. But when someone would come up and say, I understand, and then tell me, I lost my son, my daughter, my wife, etc., you realize they understand. And for me, there were people early on that made a difference, people I didn't know at all who would. I remember when I lost my wife and daughter, and my sons were still in the hospital, getting calls from people saying, I understand. And after a while, you feel like saying, stop, I know you mean well, but you don't have any idea. And I remember getting a call from a former senator governor from New Jersey, who I had never met. He was 40 years my senior at the time. And he said, Governor Hughes, he said, I understand. And I almost said, I didn't say anything, he said, he said, my apartment, actually it was a row house, was across the green from my office. And I used to go home for lunch when I was Attorney General in New Jersey. And he said, one day I was walking across, it was a sunny day, and the woman who helped take care of the house came running out and said, she's dead, she's dead, she's dead. And my wife had died of an aneurysm. And he said, so I understand. And he said, what helped me the most was, he said, what happens is when you smell that fragrance, you go by that room, you open the closet door, you see a piece of memorabilia that reminds you, or you pass by that field. He said, it brings back it the memory as if it happened just 5 minutes earlier. And he said, you think you're never going to get better. And he said, so what I did, he said, I got a piece of graph paper. And every night before I put on one axis, the dates, and the other axis, the bottom axis, the dates, day after day. And the other axis, the number 1 to 10. And I would chart how I felt every day. And he said, I found the downs were just as down like the moment I heard the news. But he said, don't look at it for 6 months. And he said, then take it out, lay it out, and look at it. And you'll see the down days. He said, a mark on how you felt, 1 to 10, or 0 to 10. 0 is the moment it happened. 10 is the happiest day of your life. You're not going to have any 10s. But he said, chart it. And he said, what you'll find is the down days get further and further and further and further apart. And that's when you know you can make it. And for me, it made me realize as well that when you've been through it, what people are really saying to me when they come up and ask me or want me to hug them, or just, what they're really saying, tell me I'm going to be okay. Tell me I can get through how'd you get through it? And And so it's something that that I can't say I enjoy doing, but I know what solace I got from people telling me you can make it, in effect, because they made it. And so that's why I do it.
Yeah. And is that sort of what you say to them? What you were telling me?
Well, what I say to them is, I say that, and I mean it. I said, you're not going to believe me now, but there will come a moment when the memory of your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, whatever, brings a smile to your lips before it brings a tear to your eye. That's when you know you're going to make it, and you will make it. And I tell them that for me, and everybody's different, the only way I've gotten through, and by the way, a lot of people have had worse things happen than me. And I have an incredible family that's been surrounded me. And we've shared the grief with one another, we've supported one another. But there's so many people today in this town of Muscatine that had worse things happen than me, but they get up every day, they put one foot in front of the other. They're a real hero. I mean, they don't have anybody. That single mom, that single dad, that person who just lost their only child. I mean, they get up every day and they put one foot in front of the other. They're real heroes. One of the things that I found was that for me, I had to turn the loss into purpose. And for me, my two boys survived when I lost my wife and daughter. And I realized that that they were my purpose in life. And the irony of all ironies is that, for example, I commuted every single day, 250 miles a day. I'd get up and make sure there was no all the family kind of breakfast, but we get up, we have breakfast together. And I made sure no matter what time I got home, I'd climb in bed with them, and I did different beds and scratch their backs or whisper in their ear or pet them. And we'd always say, like my grandpa did with me, we always say 3 Hail Marys and God bless our troops. And if they were awake enough, we'd talk about their day. If they weren't, then I'd just lie there with them and pet them, and they know it. Matter of fact, to this day, my son Hunter said, "Dad, you'd always come home and it made me feel good. You smell like work." But it was. But it got to the point where I realized everybody's giving me this credit for being a good father, going home every single day and leaving, driving them to school at 7:30 in the morning and getting an early train and getting home at 8 o'clock. Being a single father for 5 years. But I needed them more than they needed me. And so they're the ones that saved my life at that time. And they became my purpose. And I remember one day watching them walk into an event with me I was doing, and they came. I remember them walking through the door, and they're a year and a day apart, the boys. And they were then probably 13 and 14. And I looked at them both and I thought, I looked up to them. I wasn't proud of them. I realized I looked up and they were better men than I was. I actually looked up to my sons. And so, when my daughter came along, it was, she would, I was really surprised that she was 6 years old, and I walked in her room, again, kiss her goodnight when I got home late. And I saw, sitting on her side table, a picture of my deceased daughter that she kept. And I said, "Honey," she said, "I always keep it, Daddy. I always keep it." I talked to Caspi. Her name was Naomi, her nickname was Caspi, because my son, Beau, when he'd walk up to his mother, his deceased mom, and she'd say, he'd put her hand in her stomach, he said, "Can you feel her?" He said, Mommy, she's like, Casper. I can't see her, the friendly ghost. Like Casper. So we used to call her Caspy. Her name was Naomi. And, but, you know, it's all that sort of web that got me through.
What you were saying about
Well, we can do a little more, and then I'll go. I don't want to.
about looking up to your sons. You know, I've heard you say before in interviews that you hope Beau is proud of you. Do you think he is? And why is that so important?
Well, I know Hunt's proud of me. I know Ashley, because they're alive, and I talk to them every day, or I text them every day. Look, Beau knew he was dying. It wasn't a question of a sudden accident. And I wrote about in the book, Promise Me, Dad, where we'd go home every Friday. He lived, as the crow flies, a mile from our house. It took about 12 minutes to get there because of back roads. And we used to go home on Friday and go over and have dinner with him. He was a sitting attorney general, and he wanted to finish his term. And he worked like hell to make sure he had the cognitive capability to keep doing it. But it was about 6 months before he actually passed. And we went over for dinner at his house, and we were sitting at the table, and he asked his wife, Hallie, if he would take the kids to bed, and they were young then. And he said, Dad, can you stick around? And Jill had left to go home and change because we got right off the train to come over. And he looked at me, he said, Dad, I know no one in the whole world loves me as much as you do. He said, but Dad, I'm going to be all right no matter what happens. It's the first time I heard him come to terms with the fact he was dying. He said, Dad, I'm going to be okay, I promise you. He looked at me and said, Dad, but promise me. Promise me, Dad. You're going to be okay. I said, Boy, I'll be fine. And I know everybody knows by now because I've been made fun of for all my life saying it, but he'd say, Dad, look at me. Give me your word as a Biden dad. Give me your word, Dad, you're going to be okay. I said, I promise you, Beau. I commit I will be. I knew what he meant. He was worried. He knew I would always take care of the family. But he was worried that I would withdraw. I would stop doing what I've been doing in public life, and I would withdraw and just pull in. And he wanted to make sure I didn't do that. I know the press has written that he asked me on his deathbed to run for president. That's not true. But before he took his last breath, Hunter and I and the whole family were in the hospital room. The doctor told us it was just a matter of an hour or so. And we were holding hands with one another. I used to always kid the boys because we've been through so much. It's like a steel belt ran through our chest and united us in a way that was really unusual because we've been through so much. And he opened his eyes, he said, Dad, I'm not afraid. Okay, Dad. And Dad, make sure. And he turned to his brother Hunt. He said, I love you, pal. More than the world, I'm still with you.
I read in the book, you know, you talk a lot about Hunter being Beau's rock.
Absolutely.
You know, I wonder, I guess, you know, it might be an obvious answer, but who's your rock as you go through this campaign and just life?
Hunter, Ashley, and Jill. As bizarre as it sounds, my granddaughters and my grandkids. One of the reasons I wasn't going to run, because I knew how rotten this outfit is, what they do. The Giulianis of the world and the Trump's thugs. And I was worried that I knew they'd go after anything that I held sacred. And everybody knows that for me, the beginning, middle, and end is family. And so I got a phone call from my daughter, my granddaughter Naomi, the love of my life. My oldest granddaughter, she's now a senior at Columbia Law School. I got a phone call in, it was April, and she said, "Pop, we have a tradition in our family, going back to my parents, that any child can ask for a family meeting, not a joke. And we have one, period, no matter what they say. It seldom happens." But she said, "Pop, we want to have a family meeting, just you and Nana, and the kids," meaning the 5 grandchildren. So she came down from New York, from Columbia. She was her 2nd year, and Finnegan Biden, she's the one, my secret weapon. She's going to be a president someday. She came down from University of Pennsylvania, wasn't far, and my granddaughter Maisie, who's just a great kid. She's now a freshman at Penn, but she was a senior in Washington, came up. And Beau's 2 children, Natalie, who's now in 9th grade, then in 8th, and Hunter, who's in 8th, was in 7th. We walked in the library and we sat down, and Natalie said, "Pop, we've been talking. You gotta run. You have to run, Pop." And I said, "Well, guys, I don't know." And they said, "Pop," and little Hunter spoke. We said, "We know it's going to be mean, Pop. We know it's going to be mean. But Pop will be okay." Their whole life, either their father or their grandfather has been a attorney general or a senator or a vice president. And I really do. I know I said it before, I shouldn't have, but I do get up in the morning, and I hope Beau's proud of me. I wear this bracelet. It's a rosary. My son was wearing it when he died. And it's from the shrine in Mexico, Our Lady Shrine. And we went down together to pray. And he's wearing it when he died with my son and my daughter. And I know he's with me. I know, I really do. He's inside me. And when I tell people, back to the rope lines, people come up to me and say, I mean, literally, people will say, I don't know if you ever talked about it, they'll say, "I lost my daughter 10 days ago. Would you just hug me?" Men, just hug me. Let me know. Can I make it? And the extent that it gives any solace, I feel like I'm kind of paying back what people did for me. I'm talking too much. I'm telling you too much, but it really, the vast majority of people have a sense of empathy. I can tell you do have a sense of empathy. I don't mean for me, but just for people. what bothers me most is the administration now has no sense of empathy. You know, it's like the philosopher said, people should not be viewed as a means to an end, but an end in themselves. And that's, so when I think about it, it is, for me, it's kind of all wrapped up into one. It's, I'll conclude by saying, Beau, God love him, poor kid, I did every one of his commencements, 8th grade, high school, college, law school. He asked me to do a lot of things. Hunter never asked me to do anything, but the only thing he ever asked me when he was a senior at Georgetown, he joined a thing called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. My son Hunter is the most generous, brightest guy I've ever known, for real. And it was always about helping other people with Hunter, still is. And so he joined the Jesuit Volunteer, he'd gone down to Belize, and the Jesuit Volunteer Corps is not about proselytizing. It's about giving back to the community. So he went back down to Belize to teach English to indigenous kids, and then for a summer. And then when he was graduating, he joined the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and he ran an emergency service shelter in Portland, Oregon, that would do everything from provide housing to collect food to pay bills for people that had electric being shut off. And when I went to see him, there were cars lined up being driven up, and he learned it's so hard to decide who to help and how you can help whom with limited resources. And so he said, the president of Georgetown, they have what they call a retreat in Gadsden Hall. And so all the students who were part of the Jesuit Volunteer Corps were assembled, and Father O'Donovan asked me to come, and the president of the university, and asked me would I give a speech on how my faith has informed my public life. And I've never talked about that because I've been fastidious about keeping separation of church and state. But Hunt asked me to do it, so I worked harder. The 3 most difficult speeches ever made, that was one of them. And I spent a lot of time working on it. And what I realized is that the thing that's motivated everything about me and my children is the abuse of power. My dad used to say the greatest sin of all is the abuse of power, whether it's physical, political, economic. And the cardinal sin of all was for a man to raise his hand to a woman or a child. But when I really spent my time thinking about it, is that the Catholic faith I was raised in was John the 23rd, and it was about Catholic social doctrine. And it was about dealing with the abuse of power. And I realized there was no distinction between my faith, my family values, and my political values. And it wasn't based on issues about abortion or anything like that. It was based upon the notion that you have an obligation to deal with the abuse of power. And the guy who's done the most, even more than my son, Beau, to deal with the abuse of power, has been my son, Hunter, and my daughter, Ashley. Hunter spent a year working before he went off to school, law school, running that facility, a significantly large facility. It had been a Catholic parish that had been, out west, the rundown neighborhoods are single-family homes. Back east, they're all row houses. And then, he ended up running the World Food Program, USA. he ended up working in refugee camps, and when the hurricanes occurred in the Philippines, going and volunteering and bringing people to. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you can find purpose in profound loss, it makes it easier. And no one lost more in Beau's death than Hunter. And this is a guy who lived through watching his sister die and his brother. But so the overall point is, I think that the way to deal with grief is to try to focus on what you can do that the person you're grieving for would want you to do, that you know would matter to them. And I don't know if that answers any of your question. I apologize for getting emotional about it, but it's,
Sir, you're at 30 minutes.
there's just so many people I think about, I really mean it, every day that get up and face the most horrible things, and they get up and do it. I mean, they're real heroes. I have a good friend, I'll end with this, a woman who used to run my office. Remember Michelle? This woman ends up contracting cancer, dies very rapidly, a lot of suffering. 5 days after she dies, her father has contracted cancer. 4 days before, he dies. Her sister, who worked for me, Sarah, she ends up contracting breast cancer all within 14 days and ends up having the mastectomies. And then I learned that the father of the children Michelle left behind gets in a horrible car accident 8 days ago and he's in an induced coma. He's probably not going to make it. That's almost beyond belief. But there are people like that who just get back up. And as I said, you know, my faith has gotten me through most of it. But there's that famous expression by Kierkegaard, faith sees best in the dark. And sometimes it's really dark.